Today, we'll be diving into the cozy game, Animal Crossing, and recreate some of the delicious looking recipes that you can unlock throughout the game. Food and cooking aren't critical parts of the game, but I love being able to unlock new recipes and cook them in my little kitchen. I also find it really fun to display them on my island, share them with my villagers, or just eat them so that I can chop down some trees. Another thing that makes cooking in the game so fun is that you need to harvest and catch all of the ingredients to actually make the recipes, kind of like real life. So for this video, I tried to pick recipes with a variety of ingredients and harvesting methods. So get comfy, relax, and let's head over to my island. I thought it would make sense for us to start off this video with a breakfast recipe, so pancakes it is. First of all, aren't these the most perfect looking pancakes you've ever seen? And to me, they more so resemble Japanese souffle pancakes rather than the classic American style pancakes that I'm used to. So that's what we're making today. And to be honest with you, I really struggled with this recipe at first, but I think after 8 tries, I finally got it. So first, I separated some eggs into the whites and the yolks. Then into the whites, I'm adding a bit of sugar and whisking that until it reaches stiff peaks. In a separate small bowl, I combined the rest of the ingredients. That'll be the egg yolks with some milk, vanilla paste, cornstarch, and a bit of flour. Then to combine the two into a batter, I found that the trick is to add half of the yolk mixture into the whites at a time and gently fold that in. You really don't want to mix this a lot. Yeah, basically just as little as possible. To a medium-sized skillet, I added some avocado oil, turned the heat to low, and once it was hot, I piped about half of the batter into 2 small mounds. Give them about 3 to 4 minutes to steam. Then you can pipe the rest of the batter on top of each of them to get nice and tall pancakes. I served this up immediately once it was done cooking, since these have a tendency to deflate pretty quickly, but I added a bit of butter and maple syrup on top, just like the ones we see in the game, and I enjoyed it with a cup of matcha. This next recipe is a very simple one, so much so that according to the game, there's only one ingredient, which is apples for an apple smoothie. Also, please let me know if it's just me, but I hate having to chop wood because I feel like I'm being unjustly targeted by wasps. Like, it's so frustrating, so if you have any tips, please leave them below. I greatly appreciate it. So in return, I'll cue you into my perfected formula for smoothies. Okay, so even though the recipe just calls for apples, my secret for the thickest, creamiest smoothies is a bunch of frozen fruit, a scoop of ice cream, and the tiniest splash of juice, basically just enough to get everything blended together. But upon tasting this, it was a bit too grainy from the apples for my taste, so I reblended it with some more frozen fruit, which ended up giving it this pretty pink color, which doesn't look like the game, but yeah, this ended up being so refreshing. Moving on to some savory recipes, I really wanted to somehow incorporate diving into this video. It's one of my favorite things to do in the game. Like, I can just turn off my brain and do it for hours. One of the recipes I've unlocked while diving is the recipe for seaweed soup. In the game, it either looks like a Japanese miso soup with seaweed bits or Korean miyeokguk, but I decided to go with the Korean seaweed soup since I really wanted to highlight the seaweed itself. Okay, so first I soaked the dried seaweed in some cold water for 15-ish minutes. To some sesame oil over medium heat, I added garlic along with the rehydrated seaweed, a bit of fish sauce, and sea salt. Then I dumped in the water and a packet of this dashi powder that is going to add even more of that umami oceanic flavor to the soup. I brought this to a boil and then let the soup simmer for about 20 minutes. I thought it would be nice to pair this soup with another more substantial seafood dish, and immediately this aji fry stood out to me. But unlike diving, I actually hate fishing. I'm not sure if I'm just impatient, but it makes me so anxious. Anyways, for the fish itself, I was lucky enough to find this already butterflied horse mackerel at my local Japanese store. I unfortunately didn't realize that the heads were still attached, so I had the pleasure of removing them. To prepare them for frying, we're breading these in flour, beaten egg, and some panko breadcrumbs. These cook super quickly, so just let them fry up for about a minute on each side until they're super crispy. The last thing is to prep the sides for the fish, which are super thinly sliced cabbage, a wedge of tomato, and a big dollop of Kewpie mayo on the side. As someone who loves seafood, this meal was so good. I especially recommend trying the seaweed soup if you've never had it before. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I chose this next recipe simply because it looked cute. And to me, it really embodies that Animal Crossing vibe. It's the sea bass pie. First, we're putting together a simple pie crust. Into a mixing bowl, add the flour, sugar, and cold butter, which you need to cut into cubes first. Then I'm rubbing, is that the right word? Then I'm rubbing the butter into the dry ingredients by pressing them together with my fingertips until a rough dough forms. You can also add a bit of cold water if the dough needs help coming together. Then transfer this mix onto your floured surface and quickly bring the dough together with your hands. Divide this dough into 2 balls and wrap them in parchment paper. Place them into the fridge for at least 1 to 2 hours. Onto the filling, I'm baking the sea bass in the oven and just seasoning that with some olive oil, salt, and pepper. Into a pan over medium heat, saute some onions and garlic in melted butter and let this cook for 3 to 4 minutes before adding in a few spoons of flour. Once that's cooked down for a bit, start stirring in the milk gradually. Season with a bit more of that dashi powder and a pinch of salt and pepper and remove it from the heat. To finish off the filling, stir in the cooked sea bass from earlier and a few frozen peas as well. Oh, and I also made some mashed potatoes to go under the fish filling. Now grab a large pie dish and dump in the mashed potatoes, followed by the fish mixture and optionally some shredded cheese. Okay, back to the pie dough. Take one of the discs of dough and roll it out to a little larger than the pie dish you're using. We're gently draping this over the filling and rolling out the second piece of dough to make our little decorations. Here I'm just brushing a little bit of egg wash onto the crust so that the decorations can stick and brown up in the oven. Finally, we can fold the excess dough around the edges onto itself to create a sort of crust, and I'm just using my fingers here to even everything out and crimp it into this pattern. You can also just leave it as is or use a fork to make a little design. Yeah. And once you're happy with it, it can finally go into the oven. This turned out even cuter than I imagined, and an added bonus was that it tasted super cozy and comforting too. So I wanted to include some sort of dessert. Why did I say it like that? dessert in this video, and I may or may not have chosen this because I couldn't find carrots to make the carrot cake that I wanted. In preparation for this video, I spent 2 weeks trying to hunt down either carrots or carrot starters, but alas, we're making an apple tart instead. As the base, I made a sweetened tart crust dough with a bit of ground almond since I think the flavors complement apples really well. So into a mixing bowl, add flour, almond flour, sugar, and softened butter, and give those a quick mix. Then you can add in an egg and mix that again until it roughly comes together and transfer that onto a floured work surface. This dough can be a bit on the dry side, so using your hands, bring the dough together until it forms a nice smooth ball of dough. Grab a piece of parchment and let that chill in the fridge for about an hour. Onto the custard. To a small saucepan, add the milk and cream and heat that until it just starts to simmer. And into a bowl with the eggs and egg yolks, I'm adding sugar, salt, and vanilla paste. Mix this until it becomes this pale yellow color, and then carefully add in the warm milk and cream while whisking everything together. Now roll out the dough into a large circle about an inch larger than the tart tin you're using. The one I'm using here is around 9 inches, so I went for 10 inches because math. Okay, this next part can be a little tricky, but you can do it. Very carefully transfer the dough into the tart pan. No worries if the dough breaks or cracks a little bit. You can just patch it up with your fingers and any excess dough that you might have. We're blind baking this crust, which means that we're going to cover it with some parchment paper or foil and add some kind of pie weight on top of that. You can use beans or even sugar, but I'm just using some rice because I always have some in my pantry. But yeah, bake this for about 15 minutes and then we're going to remove the weights and bake for another 5-ish minutes or until it starts to brown and get a little bit crispy. Now we can pour in the custard we made earlier directly into the crust and bake that for around 45 minutes or just until the custard is set. Finally, moving on to the apple portion of this apple tart, cut the apples into very thin slices and please be careful of your fingers. Then just carefully layer them across the custard. I tried to lay them so that it looks similar to the one in the game, but I couldn't quite figure that out, so I went with this rose or flower sort of shape. We're baking this one last time and I'm brushing a bit of jam onto the apple slices just for a little bit of shine, but it's totally optional. I decided to serve this along with some coffee to balance out all of the sweetness and complement the almost nutty, warm, autumnal flavors, which I'm so excited for more of in the upcoming months. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I genuinely had so much fun, so please let me know if you want to see more Animal Crossing recipes, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.